over the weekend while Donald Trump was in Pennsylvania doing a campaign event. There was an assassination attempt on his life. The shooter tried to shoot him after crawling onto the roof of a nearby building, avoiding the Secret Service, and there have been a lot of debate and speculation online about how the Secret Service let him get through. He then let off a volley of shots, one of which just passed the president across his cheek, clipped his ear, and then the president hit the deck. The rest of the shots missed. One hit a bystander, killing him while he was trying to protect his family in the crowd, before the shooter himself was then taken out by the United States Secret Service. Let's play some of the footage. This is time synchronized footage from two different angles, because most people have seen the forward-facing angle. This is just a different version, so you guys can see there were, the other angles of the shooting.
He was doing his job. I wouldn't even be doing this. I'd be at some beautiful place with a gorgeous ocean. The
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down. See him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And still I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House.
So what's going on here is this is footage from a different person in the crowd who have spotted that there was somebody on the building crawling before he opened fire.
Because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's
There he
not
is.
easy because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people.
There he is. You could see him right here, him crawling on the top of the building. So I guess I didn't know when we were going to talk about the suspect in today's video, but I guess now is as good as time as ever. So the suspect is this fella right here. This is Thomas Crooks, Thomas Matthew Crooks. He is a 20-year-old, and well, most people don't have much to say about him, mostly because he doesn't have an online presence, as in there's no social media account like a Twitter, a Facebook, I don't know, a MySpace, a Fur Affinity account. I don't know what this guy was doing online. There's none of this available, and so nobody can dig through it and be like, haha, he liked an Andrew Yang post from 2019. He was a Yang terrorist. You can't do that because there's nothing online. So that's one thing that's crippling people. So a lot of people have been relying on a few pieces of information, because immediately it was, oh my gosh, the president was shot at, leftist, liberal. I saw some people saying this Biden terrorist, or like this Biden supporting terrorist. And I'm thinking to myself as they're saying this, through the mind of a terrorist, right? If we could all put ourselves in the perspective of somebody who wanted to do a terrorism, out of all the people who would inspire, who could have somehow figured out the number combination of words to inspire me to do a terrorism, or inspire anybody to do a terrorism, I don't think Obama, well, not Obama, oh, I just had a Bidenism. I don't think it's Biden at the top of that list. Biden saying like, this is America, it can do anything you put your mind to. And then he's like, okay, I hear your orders, Mr. President. I'm gonna go get a rifle. Chocolate chip. Really, Mr. President? Pipe bomb, mailbox? No, that's not happening. So I immediately just knew the best thing to do in these situations is be quiet, because it's not impossible that this guy was like some anarchist communist. It's not impossible that this guy was some crazy Biden supporter. I mean, I didn't think it was likely, but it wasn't impossible. But it's also not possible. It's also not impossible that he's just some crazy schizophrenic. And so when people started digging, they found out that he was a registered Republican. Mind you, he's 20 years old, so he couldn't have voted in a presidential election yet, but he is registered to vote with the Republican Party. And so people were like, oh my goodness, he's a Republican. And then reports came out from his school of people saying he was a loner kid, but that he was conservative leaning from most of the reports from his buddies. But then another piece of information came out showing he did donate to a progressive political PAC around $15 a few years ago. And so there's all this information that paints a, at best, if you wanted to be generous, a politically ambiguous. What a word that would have been. Ambiguous. I messed it up again. Ambiguous picture. Ambiguous. Biden is rubbing off on me. I don't know what's going on. You see, that's our aspirational man as the representative of the country, and now he's having an effect on the youth. The way he speaks is rubbing off on me. So I will also say about this guy, since we know nothing else about him, I was questioning whether he had ties to the family of Bashar al-Assad, because if you look here from a picture from at the shooting, you could see this distinct feature above his face, notably his forehead, and then you can look at Hafez al-Assad's, which is Bashar al-Assad's father, and his forehead. And so I was just, it's just a connection I was thinking about that I hope that somebody looks into. Anyway, back to the original videos before we can move on to the consequences of this.
In our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. And it's much tougher than if it happened. We have the strongest border ever. And recorded.
And they really noticed him on the roof for like a good minute. A good minute before we jump back over to the Trump video.
History with the best border. In fact, if they could ever put up a chart, I don't know if they can do it. Do you guys have access to that chart that I love so much? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter, do you? Because these teleprompters are so damn boring, I try and explain that. Oh, there's it. Wow. You guys are doing it. They're getting better with time. My guys, take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's when I left office. That was the lowest point, and that comes right from the government services, comes right out of Border Patrol. Take a look at that. So that arrow is the lowest amount of illegal immigration ever in recorded history into our country. And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened.
I'm sorry I'm doing the long version, but I thought, hey, most of you guys have probably seen the short version already of like the 15-second clip. So why not show from the start to the end, time-stamped with a bunch of videos from the scene? I prefer stuff like this as well. This is what we did with Offbeat Research. You should go check out Offbeat Research if you prefer breakdowns like this.
Happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit over that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that says, hey,
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful.
Okay, so a lot happened in a very short period of time. So let's go back and let's recap. Because here you can see a lot of new videos come up. So on the right here, that is Secret Service snipers on the roof that are meant to protect the president in a situation like this and potentially take anybody out in the crowd if they start posing a threat to the presidential nominee. In the middle, you can see that's a video from behind Trump from when the bullets start flying and you see him throw himself to the floor. The video below that, that's just forward-facing footage from the press teams. Let's continue. Let's go back. Now, if you look here, both in the video above and the video below, you can see Trump moves his hand right up to his ear. Because again, the bullet, when it passed him, what happened is he was looking forward and then he turned his head and the bullet went straight past him, hit his ear, meaning that if his head was still forward facing and that bullet would have went that same direction, he would have been probably killed.
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful.
Isn't there a photo shot showing the bullet? You know, I'll let this keep playing and I'll see if I can find it. Okay, I found it. For those of you who wanted to see the picture of the bullet, here you could see, who can we give credit to here? We got to give credit. Doug Mills of the New York Times. This picture was taken by Doug Mills. So all the credit to Doug Mills for taking the, I hate to use the word money shot, but I mean, oh my gosh, what a lucky frame. Yeah, no, that's the bullet right past his head. Again, if his head would have been tilted back, it would have hit him right in the back of the head. And I mean, I don't know if he would still be with us or not, but it wouldn't have ended the way it did. Trump would be a lot more than just grazed.
We need to go live right now. We are live right now at the Trump rally. We don't know if President Trump has been shot. We know he hit the ground. We do not know if President Trump has been shot. He's up.
Trump gets
He's up.
And he asked the Secret Service to collect the shoes, tells them to wait.
Shots are still continuing to be fired. He's giving a thumbs up, everybody.
And then
He's
Trump
giving a
raises
thumbs up.
his fist to signal to the crowd. And by the way, the thing that's showing in the middle is you've all seen that famous photo of Trump with the flag in the background, his fist raising. This is the moment that that photo was shot. You can see from the angle of the photographer. He's wearing a GoPro here. All the credit to that guy as well. There it is. So I know there's been a lot of critique of the Secret Service this night, and I think that there's probably room for critique for the Secret Service this night, and we're going to know more as the investigation goes through. But I also do want to say that the Secret Service did have to deal with Donald Trump asking them to get him his shoes 3 times while he was on the floor bleeding after he was shot, and then telling them to wait so he can do his different political symbols and his, like, put his fist into the air, etc., etc. And it's, you know, politically smart for him and advertising himself, him doing that in that moment, but also probably not the easiest for the service. But, you know, they didn't, there's been a lot of critique to go around. We'll probably have to wait and see to see the full picture, but there's been a lot of critique of how the Secret Service performed this night.
Breaking news right now. This is Vanessa Broussard reporting to you live from Butler, Pennsylvania. We hear.
Man, he raised his fist like multiple times. So he didn't just raise his fist like once. He raised his fist once after he just got up, a second time as he was coming down the stairs, and a third time as he was getting into the car. Okay, so that's all of the footage from the day's events, at least everything that was of note. Well, there was one other moment that I did want to point out because I just found it personally interesting. As Trump was getting shot, this woman just played Candy Crush completely unbothered. Well, she seemed to be having fun though. Okay. So, there's a few things I want to say. So the first thing I want to say, and I said this earlier, but I need to repeat it, is that this assassination attempt was obviously extremely politically toxic for the United States. There's been now the first thing I want to say is, for everybody saying that this was staged, I find it very unlikely that this was staged. I just do. I just find it hard to believe. We have it, and it's honestly very easy for me to believe that somebody would attempt to assassinate presidential nominees given our current political climate. It's not hard for me to believe at all. And I'm honestly surprised so many other people are surprised that it's something that's possible in this political climate. The way that, you know, people are talked about as like the doom of the United States if they get elected, or I mean, the way Biden and Trump talk about each other, both in real fair critiques and definitely not real fair critiques and just exaggerations. But I don't know why people are particularly surprised. But for all the things, I'll just throw out a few reasons why it'd be difficult. First, you'd have to have the Secret Service involved. You'd have to have the Secret Service being involved in endangering somebody that they are meant to protect. You'd have to have the local police department probably involved as well. You would have to have that 20-year-old schizo kid involved. You would have had them fail, so they got somebody, snuck them all the way up there, and then a shot that anybody in military basic would have been trained at how to shoot. If you were in the United States Armed Forces, they should have been able to hit that shot at the distance that he was shooting. And then he misses like 3 or 4 shots in a row. So why go through all the trouble just for Trump to miss? I mean, I don't know. I mean, for the shooter to miss. I guess the plot is, because I see some people saying it's fake for just random conspiratorial reasons, but there's a set of Democrat voters or left-wingers who are saying it's fake because Trump wanted to make himself look good, and so that's why they got somebody like him, and that's why, you know, because he doesn't need to be a good shot, because they just needs to miss. But the thing is, it's not easy to shoot near somebody and make it look real while also, you know, not hurting them. You would have to shoot close enough so that nobody would be suspicious. And that kid did shoot close enough, but he doesn't have enough military experience or like experience with guns to shoot close enough to do it without necessarily hurting him, or shooting close enough while not, you know, strain over and seriously injuring him. I just don't believe the it's fake stuff. I just haven't seen any evidence for it. I think it's mostly people who just don't want Trump to be pictured as sympathetic for like literally 5 seconds, so it has to be fake. Because if we talk about Trump actually possibly being assassinated, then that could paint him in a sympathetic picture, which is bad because Trump bad. But yeah, no, it's not a false flag, because it just seems way too dangerous of a false flag, and I have seen no evidence for it outside of, well, it will help his poll numbers. And I don't even know if it will substantially help his poll numbers. It might help him with a few points, but like, Trump is already an extremely politically divisive figure. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's one thing that's not been good for. It's not been good for, I guess you could say, left-winger sense of reality. Another thing that it's not good for
is a curd.
Can't believe Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys would do this. Wild.
Thank you for the $5. I appreciate it. I love that show. The other reason it's politically toxic is because normalization of the assassination of political candidates does not necessarily end at 1, 2, 3, or 4 political figures. The more that these types of events happen, the more normalized it becomes, the more other people could be inspired to do it, or the more people could think that they are in their right, or that they have the power to do it. And so then the more people feel confident in going out to attempt it. And normalization of assassination of political opponents will not necessarily end with the people you do not like, right? It could easily spill over to the people you like as well. It's not necessarily just going to hit Donald Trump. It could hit Bernie Sanders. It could hit Elizabeth Warren. It could hit Kamala Harris. It could hit Joe Biden. It could hit all number of people. So the normalization of assassination of political anyone is not good, outside of the most egregious and dangerous of circumstance, when there's no more options on the table and you're dealing with somebody who is going to destroy the ability to try again. And we can talk about the specifics of those metrics at a different point, but we have an election that is an ability that is coming up, that is an ability to try. So the idea that this is the only option available, and I've seen some people online flirting with that idea, I find to be hogwash. There's also the problem that this type of violence doesn't just normalize violence towards like the political elite, where somebody can say, oh, screw them, they're just a political elite. So if, you know, a few suits get hurt, that's not everyday working people. A lot of times the riots that come out of this, not only the civilians that get hurt by the riots, but the businesses that get damaged, or the terror attacks and the bombings that get done at political events or abortion clinics, or at LGBT nightclubs, or at churches of a certain denomination, of, you know, all these different places that could be targeted, are not hitting the political. This can hit everyday people as well. It can hurt everyday people as well. Because even if somebody doesn't necessarily see themselves as political, does not mean that an extremist who doesn't like them doesn't see them as political. By the way, not that that justifies it. If somebody's a political person, that doesn't justify violence against them. But even if you don't view yourself as political, your lifestyle choices could make you political. Oh, you're an LGBT person, you don't even vote? Okay, well, if you engaged in artificial insemination to have a child, or you were adopted, you could still be viewed as political and therefore the subject of violence. And so the more normalized the political violence and the more tense and divisive the political environment, especially at a time where somebody might be interested in a revenge killing or revenge attacks, like after a popular right-wing populist figure would have been killed and or targeted, that would be the moment to do it. In fact, I don't want to be too alarmist, but there are people who are waiting for moments like this for this exact reason, for the increased amount of political divisiveness introduced into the American culture, introduced into the American political conversation. I wonder if I have it up here. Here it is. This is from Alex Jones's InfoWars. He has a guest here, Ivan Radiklin, who's discussing how Trump getting hurt, getting an attempted assassination, or him even being killed, could be beneficial to their movement. Listen to this.
And this is a message directly to every single person on the deep state target list. My assessment, Ivan Raiklin's assessment, that if you assassinate any political presidential candidate, whether it's RFK, whether it's Trump, guess what? America will do the following immediately. They will respond in kind, and they know who you are because we've created the list. So if you
and that's a major Rubicon. They should know that
immediately. You're going to see immediate response, and there are only a few buildings in Washington, D.C. that they will probably do that.
Well, I hope that's not the case, but these people are crazy.
And having said that, if they do that, option 2 behind Trump is going to be so much better for us and so much worse.
Well, I was about to say, if they kill him, that's best case scenario from a sick level. From a sick level beating him, oh, please kill him, which but it's so good after that.
Oh, it's going to be the best cleansing and the fastest cleansing that we've ever seen in my lifetime. I assess with almost certainty, with the highest level of confidence, that if they assassinate Trump, it is so game over for them, and it's going to be so fast.
Aussie T, thank you very much. Dylan, why are you taking these psychos seriously? I'm not taking these specific guys seriously as in, oh, these guys are going to be the next president or congressman. You don't need to be a serious person to be a threat. Marjorie Taylor Greene has shown that. J.D. Vance was a venture capitalist who called Trump like heroin for America, who is like ridiculously underexperienced and not knowledgeable on foreign policy, who's now going to be Trump's VP. He didn't know like Pakistan had nukes a week ago, and he's going to be helping to manage foreign policy and international affairs. This guy, that it shouldn't be serious, but sometimes it still needs to be taken seriously. A schizophrenic in mom's basement with an AR-15 in a crowded theater can still do a lot of damage. And so for these reasons, these lone wolf attacks, the threat of individual terror attacks, group terror attacks, threat of political assassinations, for all of these reasons, the normalization of political violence is bad, but it benefits most of all people like this. For the chaos that ensues is where they can grab power, influence that they would never be able to get while people were thinking clearly. Now, back to this. Now that I've said that, I want to throw a few things out there. Some people have reacted to this a little wild. And when I say a little wild, I mean that their senses have left them, if they were ever there in the first place. Let me give you one example. This Spectator piece by Kate Andrews. Today, we're all MAGA. Look, I will go out and I will condemn political violence, of course. I will condemn doing these types of things which erode the foundation of the republic and yada yada, all the flowery words that we've already been through. You do not need to pretend that the movement of Make America Great Again is redeemable or beautiful or worth preserving or worth promoting or worth whitewashing because you're against the political violence. You do not need to do that. You do not need to get in the drum circle and sing kumbaya about these ideas. You want to talk about people as Americans? That's one thing. You want to talk about the MAGA movement as a whole, and we're all no. This is like Russell Brand hippieism, where it's not like, oh, let's all live together, let's all sing kumbaya. It's, oh, let's just all whitewash these terrible ideas, bring them into the fold, and accept them at face value with not too much pushback. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to lose our senses because of the emotion of the moment. I mean, something that I got the worst reaction on Twitter, and I mean this, and it's genuine. I meant it. It might not be pleasant to say, but getting shot is not a requirement to be president of the United States. You actually can learn very little from getting shot, especially if you only get grazed. But you can actually learn very little from being shot on how to run the country. A lot of gangsters get shot, a lot of soldiers get shot, a lot of mercenaries get shot, a lot of random people get shot, and a lot of them, in fact, I would say the majority of people who get shot after getting shot have no more of the skills necessary to lead the country. Maybe there's some life lessons they can take from it that could be beneficial in the general sense, which could then downstream. But Trump is no wiser, no better. He's no less authoritarian. He is no less better at managing economics. His policies around tariffs are no less foolish. All of the reasons why I don't want to vote for him before still exist after, and there's no more pluses to voting for him. It would be no different than just making an emotional push of, oh, somebody didn't like him and did something terrible, tried to hurt him in that way, tried to end him, therefore I have to go and support him. But again, I do not think a crazed psychopath's bullets should decide your votes for you. I think it should be based on who can best run the country, who cares about the Constitution, you know, as a basic American value, maybe not somebody who called to suspend the Constitution, for example. I mean, if we were talking about who wins a game show, if we were talking about somebody like who wins American Idol, then maybe an emotional appeal to, oh my God, this terrible thing happened to him, would be the best way of choosing the next president in the United States. But no, we're talking about somebody who's going to have control of one of the largest and most powerful nuclear arsenals in the world. I do not think it should be based upon whether or not he got a ear piercing at a campaign event. I just don't. Sorry. And I got some negative reactions to that, but it is what it is. Dylan, that may be what should be, but is that what will be? The U.S. electorate is insane. We'll have to wait for some of the post-shooting polling, but I mean, Ronald Reagan got like an immediate 15 to 20 point boost from his shooting, but that dissipated in 4 months. And wouldn't you know it, the election's about 4 months away. Now, also, I will say that Donald Trump at this point in his career is a much more political figure and a former president, where Ronald Reagan was different. And people keep talking about how this is going to make Donald Trump win. And look, we still don't have a lot of post-debate, post-shooting polling. I think we had one, and it had him like up 1 more point. But I need to wait for more polling to come out from more credible pollsters. But I mean, it could just be a small bump. But also, there have been a ton of people who have run for president after getting shot or run for office.
Blue Rider of Neptune gave Dream Canoe a Tier 1 subscription. Elections aren't won by tragedy, but by one's action.
Thank you, Blue Rider of Neptune. Like, for example, people keep comparing Donald Trump to Teddy Roosevelt. Like, hey, Teddy Roosevelt got shot. Maybe he's like Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, fine. He's like Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt lost that election where he got shot. There's been multiple people who have got shot and then went on to just lose anyway. So just because he gets shot does not mean he will win, but it certainly cannot be anything that's negative for him. It will certainly be a big fundraising boost. It'll certainly be a reason to rally Republicans around the flag. That's going to be something that Trump certainly needed in this moment, and that's something that can help him. And maybe it'll flip some people over who are on the fence but were already leaning towards Trump, for example. But the idea that it was like the final nail in the coffin of the campaign It's ahistorical. It does not have a historical precedent that this is the end. There's 4 months out. There's a lot of things that can happen in the meantime, and we don't have any polling data to indicate that it has decisively shifted in a tremendous fashion post-shooting. We're not going to have to wait for more of that data to come out, but just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so I wanted to talk about how other people have referred to this shooting, because after the assassination, immediately the media narrative machines came out. But one of the first narratives you saw on the ground is one that kind of branches out into the rest of them. Here is what you could see from the crowd in Pennsylvania after Donald Trump was shot, of one of the local rally goers going to the media that was recording the event and blaming them for the shooting.
You remember what you caused. This is your fault. You. This is your fault. Every last one. This is your fault. It is your fault. This is your fault. Hey, easy. This is your fault. I got you. Easy. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Your fault. This is your fault.
So one of the immediate narratives that came out was the idea that how the media talks about Trump and how the left talks about Trump helped inspire this political environment and has moved people to violence against Donald Trump. And therefore, the media, but also, and namely, the left, the Democrats and the people who are with them and support them, they helped create the political environment that led to Donald Trump being targeted in this way. Now, first things first, we don't know the motives of the attacker. We still don't know the motives of the shooter. Considering our record with schizophrenics, it could be any number of things. And if you don't think it could be any number of things, then you certainly have not done enough research into American schizophrenic research, our history of very crazed shooters. So now, on the first point, that this is the fault of the media, this is the fault of the left and the way they talked about Donald Trump. I cannot deny that sometimes the media gets hyperbolic. And my main problem with this hasn't been about how Donald Trump's necessarily even portrayed, but is that it's very hard for a lot of people to differentiate between what's an important Trump scandal and what's a not important Trump scandal. Like the P tapes. The P tapes were nonsense. We don't have any evidence that the P tapes were real. And there's tons of, like, maybe not tons, but there's certainly scandals like that where it wasn't important, where got a lot of attention early on during the Trump scandals, during the Trump era, and that got airtime. And then when the actual important stuff came around, like, I don't know, Trump calling for suspension of the U.S. Constitution, or Trump calling the Georgian Secretary of State and trying to intimidate him to overturn the election result, the entire fake elector scandal, the quid pro quo with President Zelensky and the phone call, the hidden classified documents scandal, which was decided today, which we're going to talk about later, but it's a scandal in and of itself. There are so many scandals that deserve real attention, but I think a lot of times the media concentrates on the tiny stuff, the silly stuff, the unimportant stuff in the grand scheme of things, and then voters a lot of times go to the ballot box crucially uninformed about exactly what Trump's plan, agenda, or mission is going back into the White House in 2024, or going into the White House the first time in 2016, or his plans for if he won again in 2020. Point is that I think the media doesn't focus on...
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much, Gupo26, for the sub, for the primer. Here's some Bezos money, you morally corrupt, bankrupt man. I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you indeed. Okay, for the media. Now, as for the left, I'm going to be blunt here. While I will say that there are certain people who... every single thing Trump does has to be compared to Hitler, and the Hitler comparisons are overdone. There are people who will misportray things that Trump said and to make it extremely hyperbolic. It's impossible for me to deny these things. But also, I don't want this to become like, oh, Trump's not nearly as, authoritarian as people have let on. Oh, Trump is not nearly as disregarding of the U.S. Constitution as his critics from within his party, within his staff, and from his opposition have said. I can't say that because I feel like I'd be lying because I don't believe it. I can believe that what the shooter did was wrong. I can believe that people have said things about Trump that's not true or have played into hyperbolic narratives for views and or political points, but I will not deny the threat to American institutions, to American democracy, that Donald Trump openly poses through what he has done before when he tried to hold on to power in 2020, from the fake elector scheme, the lies he told about how the election was stolen.
A curd is a curd.
The lies he told about mass
Cole
illegal
Cynic has
votes.
donated $5. What's going to help Trump win is the Democrats pulling their punches because of it.
Thank you so much, Cynic, for the $5. We'll see how long they pull. I know they've pulled the attack ads on media for a bit, but I don't even know if that'll last the end of the week or the end of the month even. I said end of the month even. I don't know if that'll last to the end of the month. It's the fake elector scheme. There was the plotting with Rudy Giuliani. There was the call to Brian Raffensperger. There was his attempts to just throw it out again and again and again in court cases. There was his inaction during January 6th to add public pressure, him attempting to publicly pressure and privately pressure Mike Pence to overturn the election results. There was the scheme that he tried to do with Mike Johnson and others in the House to try to send it down back to the states with the fake electors. He did everything he could to not accept the results of the election. And even after he still lost and left, he still was going off. He was still saying every other week, like, hey, how about we make me president again? At one point, even calling for the suspension of the United States Constitution so that he can be illegally reinstalled as president of the United States after Joe Biden had won the election. But this is not a new trend. When he won in 2016, he lied about mass illegals voting, and that's why he lost the popular vote. When he lost in primaries, he would make a fuss. Before 2020, he said that if he lost, it was rigged. There was no scenario going into 2020 where he loses and he respects the results of the election. And I think the same thing is true going into 2024, especially when Trump is pissed off, and I think he is very pissed off. And so I think if somebody is heading one of the two major parties and they cannot accept defeat, well, democracy doesn't work if both sides don't play along enough for the institutions to function. They don't go through the motions knowing that they can try again next year, which is what's supposed to be the solace for anybody who loses in our system. It's, well, if I didn't make a good enough case, I can try again next year. Well, okay, well, we can always have another referendum. Oh, we can always vote next time again, so it'll be fine. But if Donald Trump doesn't default to that and he instead defaults to how can I still clutch on to power, it whittles down the strength of the institution, and it's authoritarian. That's not even talking about his wanting to loosen up the libel laws, his love for authoritarians around the world, including Viktor Orban, who has gotten very close to the Conservative Party and has been going to conservative political action conferences and making speeches and getting really close to them, which is interesting for a movement that's so anti-corruption to become so buddy-buddy with the prime minister of the country in the EU with the most public sector corruption. My point is that while I don't want to engage in hyperbolic rhetoric, and we're just talking about the Democratic angle here and the authoritarian angle. We're not even talking about Trump's record of talking about bombing of civilians in warfare or any number of his other bad policy issues. But I don't want to engage in hyperbolic rhetoric, but I also don't want to play down what Donald Trump has shown his interest to be when interacting with American institutions, the United States Constitution, or democracy in and of itself as a concept. So, but we can go through a few of these reactions, a few of these people who have decided that it's Joe Biden or the Democrats, or they have figured out who's at fault here. Before we move on to who I think is at fault here,
I believe that much of the rhetoric from the left has escalated to this moment. Just last week, we saw Joe Biden trying to excuse his poor performance at the debate and get that behind him and say, now we need to put Trump in a bullseye. President Trump was literally put in a bullseye after the president of the United States, the sitting president of the United States, called for him to be put in a bullseye.
I'd like to clarify what you just said. Do you believe that President Joe Biden bears any responsibility for what happened today, or does the responsibility for the shooting lie with the shooter?
I do believe that Joe Biden is responsible for the shooting today. Kyle Clark, an innocent supporter of President Trump, someone who loved President Trump and was there exercising their right to support him, lost their life today. Everyone who has called him a fascist, everyone who has called him a threat to democracy, who said that he should be put in a bullseye, as Joe Biden said, they need to have some very...
I remember it was put in the bullseye. It was like
deep.
It was along the like putting political crosshairs. It was like something along that. I know the email that she's referring to. She's referring to like a campaign fundraiser emails like donate here so we can put Trump in the bullseye. And the idea was like the bullseye of their political attacks. But you know, when I hear complaints like this from Lauren Boebert of all people, okay, Miss Beetlejuice, it just falls so flat for me. I mean, Rudy Giuliani was out there with Trump yelling, fight, fight, fight on January 6th. And you're going to tell me now that this type of political language, like, okay, when he said fight during J6 and then there was a fight after, that was not him telling them to go fight or trying to encourage them to fight. But when Joe Biden says, like, put them in the bullseye in reference to campaign attack ads, like, oh, we're going to go after them. That was in reference to, we want a 20-year-old to crawl onto the roof of a building and start taking pot shots at our opponent, which could end up just helping their campaign. It just falls flat. It just falls flat. This is just a limp political attack from somebody who would grab anything that could be perceived in your wildest dreams as a tool for attacking your political opponents and will immediately throw it to somebody extremely shallow, and it's just another shallow attack from them. But another shallow person, from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to the media, this is your fault. They demonized us. They called us Nazis, and they spent the past decades inciting violence against us. They do it every day, and yesterday they got what they wanted: an assassination attempt on President Trump and one of his supporters murdered. I will say Marjorie Taylor Greene in particular is responsible for creating the political environment we live in today. Again, I will not sit here and claim that no Democrat at all bears responsibility for using insightful or hateful rhetoric or even violent rhetoric, even though I would say that the type of rhetoric we're discussing here, I would say on average, elected Democrats participate in less. But of course, that could be me coming from a biased perspective. But even if I were to say it was 50-50, 40-60, 60-40, at the end of the day, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene herself has liked like internet messages on Facebook and like given them likes and thumbs up and promoted them that were calling for the assassination of Nancy Pelosi and a ton of different political rivals, including the sitting president of the United States, Joe Biden, when she was in the QAnon phase, very shortly before being elected to public office. She is somebody who's been extremely insightful in office, comparing Democrats to Nazis, comparing Democrats to the Reich, comparing Joe Biden to Adolf Hitler, all number of like horrible, horrid comparisons. The last person in the world that can throw this stone is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I do think that people should be careful before they jump to Nazi or Hitler comparisons, and they should be respectful not only of the political environment we have, but of the people who died under these regimes. But Marjorie Taylor Greene had herself to go to the Holocaust Museum and apologize for saying that, hey, having a vaccine mandate is like the Holocaust. Here's a representative, elected representative in the United States Congress. The Republican District Attorney in Butler County, PA, Butler County was where the rally was held, should immediately file charges against Joseph R. Biden for inciting an assassination. And again, it's just, I have this image in my head of Joe Biden just on the TV, just like kind of like, you know, a little bit of static. He looks serious into the camera. hey, Trump's a bunch of malarkey. He's got the morals of an alley cat. Ooh, felon, huh? Got him. Okay, Mr. President, I know what to do. Nobody believes that. Nobody in a million years believes that. You could point, if you were, for example, let's say you go through this person who did this social media account and you find him following accounts that were like really far off fringe accounts on the internet that were calling for direct violence on President Trump, or they were specifically liking messages of a similar style, or they were following specific politicians that have called for something like that, or they were specifically spreading around misinformation posted online about this topic, then you could like try to connect them to this, to this, to this, to this. There is no way to connect Joe Biden to this person at all, especially when this person is not even registered in Joe Biden's political party, but in the opposition of Joe Biden's political party. To try to connect him here is just pure political opportunism. I mean, in a way, as much outrage as Destiny has created through how he's talked about the man that was shot, protecting his family out in the crowd this day, it's pretty disrespectful to talk about an event where somebody died and immediately just turn it into a political attack ad instead of, you know, talking about the person who died or talking about the factual circumstance of what happened, but instead just make it another way to attack Donald Trump's political opponents. It's just turning a corpse into cannon fodder for your political movement. And I don't really like it. I think it's kind of gross. But it wasn't just American politicians that were reacting to this and were trying to promote this idea. The Kremlin, as in the Russian government, blamed the Biden administration for, and I quote, creating the atmosphere around candidate Trump, which the Kremlin claims provoked the shooting. It's good we have Moscow's perspective. Lastly, before we get into a few contrasts here, before we compare and contrast for a moment, I do want to show you one last one, and this is from Ben Shapiro. And I've chosen the moment because I do not believe that our issue with political divisiveness or political violence just started. We had a problem with political violence at the congressional baseball game. We had a problem with political violence when it came to the attempted kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer, and we had a problem with political violence when it came to January 6th and the attack on Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband. For those of you who don't remember, Paul Pelosi is the husband of Nancy Pelosi. And Paul Pelosi, back in October of 2022, was in his home when this guy called DePepe broke into his home. He was this internet sleuth who was planning to kidnap Nancy Pelosi, break her kneecaps. This is all from his testimony. He's all admitted to this. So she would have to be wheeled out onto the Hall of Congress, so it would be sent as a warning to others, like, hey, look at her terrible state, look at how her kneecaps have been crushed. If you don't want to be like that, then don't act like Nancy Pelosi. But the problem is, when he broke into Nancy Pelosi's home, Nancy Pelosi was not there. No, she wasn't. Only her husband, Paul Pelosi, was. So he took his hammer, which he used to break into the house in the first place, and then grabbed Paul Pelosi and basically held him hostage while Paul Pelosi tried to talk him down until the police got there. And when the police got there, he then attempted to beat Paul Pelosi to death with his hammer, knocking him out, striking him to the floor, sending Paul Pelosi to the hospital. It was not good for the Pelosi family. It was not good for Paul Pelosi. It was a serious medical event. I mean, he could have died. It was a politically targeted violence. It was terrorist attack. I mean, you can describe it as the terrorist attack, an attempted kidnapping of Nancy Pelosi for political purposes. How Ben Shapiro talked about this story at the time, though, now that I've described to you in detail, I mean, what the equivalent here would be like Melania Trump gets kidnapped with a hammer and then beaten. This would be the equivalent. And this is how Ben Shapiro talked about it at the time. The attempt to twist the Paul Pelosi attack into a broader story about supposed extremism in Republican rhetoric, so vote Dem, is so transparently opportunistic and pathetic. Everyone can see what you're doing, Democrats and the media, and it's disgusting. And now this is how he talked in reference to the attempt on Trump's life. A shocking and tragic day for the nation, and an amazing heroic response from President Trump. You cannot repeatedly and endlessly label a major party candidate and former president actual Hitler, a full-scale threat to democracy, without radically increasing the danger of violence in America. This danger has been obvious for years and engaged in by nearly everyone on the left, up to and including the current president. We are in a hideously ugly new era. Just the difference. And I can't believe they're going to use this for political purposes. My man is a hero. Just the difference here is so stark. And the reason I wanted to show this one in particular was also because of its relation to the Pelosi attack. Because Donald Trump Jr., the current son of the President of the United States, also went after Pelosi and Pelosi's husband after this, joking about it on Instagram, saying that they got my Paul Pelosi Halloween costume ready, which is a picture of Paul Pelosi underwear and a hammer, because Paul Pelosi was hit with a hammer and Paul Pelosi was in his underwear in nightwear when he was caught. And so a lot of Republicans were trying to suggest that maybe he was in a homosexual relationship with the person trying to kidnap his wife, which was a real rumor on the conservative internet that some people still believe. But he wasn't the only one. This wasn't the only time Donald Trump Jr. has engaged in this type of toxic rhetoric, though, even though he's a massive hypocrite on this issue, too. Seen on July 14th, this is as we're getting information about the attack on his father. Dems and their friends in the media knew what exactly they were doing with the literally Hitler bull. And this is what he had to say about American democracy under Joe Biden during the start of his term. It's a total disgrace. What's going on in this fascist regime? Democracy dies in darkness. But Donald Trump Jr. is low hanging fruit. I will say though, even though Donald Trump Jr. is low hanging fruit and a lot of the Trump family is low hanging fruit, I do want to bring them up because Trump has this thing where he takes members of his family and he tries to put them in important government positions. And last time he was only able to really do that with Jared Kushner to give them like actual influence in the Middle East, which they immediately used to make a lot of money. But I mean, in a second Trump term, when he's not restricted by, the people that, Trump supporters said would keep him in line first time around, which was a selling point, which is now something they've completely discarded. Maybe this time he will appoint Donald Trump Jr. to a government position. I mean, hell, if you listen to what Donald Trump recently said on a Fox News interview this morning, he attempted to give Ivanka Trump, his daughter, the ambassador to the United Nations, make her the ambassador to the UN. Because why? Well, because she's his daughter.
Ivanka had a very, very successful business. Unbelievable. She was doing great. She wanted to work, and I could have made her ambassador to the United Nations. I wanted to, actually. I could have given her anything. She was the smartest, everything about her. And she only wanted one job, to get people jobs. She would go around and meet with companies to hire people. She just wanted, and they didn't treat her nicely. Just treat her, treat people like with respect. Top student, top everything.
A curd is a
Brilliant
curd.
Person. They
Trump
didn't treat
moved
her.
his head to point
Pretty
at a graph
person.
about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration saved Trump's life.
Oh my goodness, you're right. Trump did move to point at a graph showing illegal immigration. Oh my goodness. Well, maybe this will mark a sea change in Trump's behavior. Maybe he'll become an open borders guy. Who knows? I also want to say on like a personal level, when it comes from Trump and the way that Trump's going to talk about how he's been portrayed in the media, Trump is somebody who has added the most out of anybody in public politics to the divisiveness in American political culture within the last decade. I mean, every single time when people talk about, hey, well, what about the stakes that are painted by left-wingers? Before we can even talk about the veracity of those stakes, Donald Trump has painted it as if America will live if he wins, America will die if Biden wins. He said multiple times that America's dying, America's being destroyed. If Joe Biden wins again, America will never recover, et cetera, et cetera. Here's just a quote just from earlier in the campaign this year. Donald Trump warns Americans won't have a country if he loses in November. I mean, those are ultimate stakes. Those are the ultimate stakes. If Donald Trump doesn't win, then America itself will be destroyed. How can you make stakes higher than that in an election? But putting aside the stakes that Donald Trump himself sets in the election, which are ridiculous, the idea that America will disappear. America will not disappear if Trump wins or if Biden wins. It just will be probably very different in ways that will either be better, worse, or not much different. But it's not just that Donald Trump has behaved when it comes to Donald Trump's hypocrisy on this issue. The big thing is going to be if Trump makes this a big sticking point of, oh, I'm being targeted. It's the way I've been insulted that led to this. Trump himself has specifically downplayed violence against his political opponents. And so I would say that's one thing you would not do if you cared about political violence. You wouldn't downplay it so nobody deals with the issue. And you certainly wouldn't call it fake when it certainly did happen. For example, 2 weeks ago at CPAC, at the Conservative Political Action Conference, Trump was saying that the conspiracy to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer was fake. It was just fake, even though a jury found the ringleaders guilty on conspiracy charges.
As another example, the sting that they did involving Gretchen Whitmer was fake. Just like those who instigated January 6th. It was a fake deal. Fake. It was a fake deal. Gretchen Whitmer was in less danger than the people sitting in this room right now, it seems to me. And you look to see what happened, and trials are going on all over the place, and I guess a lot of people, Tudor, are being exonerated, aren't they, huh?
All being exonerated. Then there was, of course, like, there's some classics here. I don't know how many of these I want to show of Trump kind of lightly suggesting violence. Not even talking about like the simple stuff of like when that guy was in the crowd that he told the crowd to kind of beat him up because they were protesting him. But I mean, talking about his political opponents. Trump at a campaign rally in North Carolina Tuesday, he suggested the Second Amendment people could potentially stop Hillary from taking away gun rights should she become president.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But
you know, that's the lightest of them all, I gotta say. The worst insult, I would say, was probably after the Paul Pelosi attack, where Trump responded to it by mocking Nancy Pelosi and her husband after the attack. So I will say, while when it comes to the political culture of the country, you could say tempering down your rhetoric in the aftermath of this attack is what's good for the country. As for what Trump personally deserves, I mean, come on, man.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
I mean, like, come on. Again, if you want to say it's bad for the country, I don't want to do it. I agree with that in principle. Trump himself, his personal consideration, I don't really pay much mind to. I will say that Trump has come out with a message of unity in reaction to the attack. Joe Biden, of course, came out and he made a speech condemning the attack, giving a nice message of unity. Donald Trump responded to that speech by just tweeting out words saying, like, we want unity. Unity is good. But the thing is, most debates online seem to come back to a linguistics conversation. When you see people debating what woke means, what is a woman, debating what is fascist and what isn't fascist. And this is no different with what unity means to Joe Biden, to most of the American public, to most of the political establishment, to whoever, might be different to what Donald Trump means by unity. Because in this case, what Donald Trump means by unity is that he no longer has to deal with any of the criminal trials against him. Here's what he wrote on Truth Social about what he means by unity. As we move forward in uniting our nation after the horrific events on Saturday, this dismissal of lawless indictment in Florida should be just the first step, followed quickly by the dismissal of all the witch hunts. So, for those of you who are confused, we had another big announcement this weekend. We had so much big news come out over the weekend, but the classified documents case, which was considered by many to be one of the strongest cases against Trump, was dismissed by a judge in Florida. So the classified documents case, to give you a quick rundown, had to do with the fact that after Donald Trump left the White House, he took a bunch of classified documents which he did not take the time to declassify. He did not go through the proper declassification process. And so for about a year and a half after he left the White House with these documents, the National Archives, which their job is to retrieve this type of stuff, was pursuing Donald Trump trying to get these documents back, where Donald Trump would play none the wiser, say he doesn't have them, but they would find out that he does have them. And so then he would ask them, like, hey, we want the documents back. And so what Donald Trump did is that he gave them some of the documents back, but then continued to retain other documents while claiming he did not have them while he did. And then according to his staff, they even cut the lights, cut the cameras in his building in Mar-a-Lago, so he could go move them around the building where no one knew where they were and hide them further. This behavior, along with the fact that they knew that he had more, led to the famous raid on Mar-a-Lago in Florida, which Trump complained so much about, but was something he probably could have just avoided by handing over the documents. And those documents were retrieved in that raid. There's a lot of speculation about what he did with those documents, if he sold them. They were not kept in particularly safe conditions. There is also audio seeming to indicate that Donald Trump had showed secret invasion plans of certain countries, which is assumed to be Iran, to journalists who did not have classification to see those plans because they were extremely top secret. And this is the type of stuff that would be of concern. Not because I want to invade Iran, but because you don't want him showing random pieces of classified material, either for bragging rights or, as another person indicated could be a problem, for profit. Definitely with Donald Trump's history of financial endeavors. Point is, the case was around his criminal mishandling of these documents after, while he was president, he increased the penalties for improper handling of classified information by government officials in reaction to the Hillary email scandal, funnily enough. But the reason this is getting thrown out isn't because of any of the merits of the case. It seems to mostly be around Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and his appointment to oversee the case. So it isn't, hey, did Trump actually mishandle the case? Did Trump actually mishandle the documents? The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Trump's argument and his team's argument was that Jack Smith, the Justice Department's appointed special prosecutor, was not supposed to be appointed to it, which is what the case was dismissed over. So it wasn't on the merits of the case, but it was dismissed. It can be appealed, and it likely will be appealed. Where it goes from there, I do not know. But that's what he's referring to. But he doesn't just want that case gone. He wants the January 6th hoax, according to him, what he's saying here, the January 6th hoax in Washington, D.C., the Manhattan DA zombie case, the New York AG scam, and the fake claims about a woman I never met, a decades-old photo in perfect line with her, then husband does not count. So this is the Jean E. Carroll case, which he already lost. And the Georgia Perfect phone call charges. This is the phone call to the Georgian Secretary of State, where he told him to find the exact amount of votes that he was down. So the number was something like, he was like down 14,321 votes. And so Trump called and said, I need you to find 14,321 votes. It's very blatant. The Democrat Justice Department coordinates all of these political attacks. That's not true. The Justice Department cannot coordinate all these political attacks. Biden is not coordinating all these political attacks. Many of these things are state-level cases that Biden, even if he could have, wants to, he can't tell the state to let it go, which are an election interference conspiracy against Joe Biden's political opponent, Me. Let us come together to end all weaponization of our justice system and make America great again. So it seems that Donald Trump wants to use this as a political device to try to end the cases against him, including cases that Joe Biden doesn't even have a say in and whether they go forward or not. So I guess that's Donald Trump's version of unity. And I think the rest of our version of unity lasted for about 48 hours after the shooting. Dylan calling people incel when he looks like an incel is hilarious. Excuse me, but it takes one to know one. Thank you. I was such an incel. I looked at men and I said, yum. I signed up full time.